Okay.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCullen. A little while ago, we took a look at some Viking-age Icelandic swords. But if there's one weapon that is truly iconic of the Viking Age, it's the axe.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're here today at the National Museum of Iceland. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Yeah.
And we have 3 examples of Icelandic Viking Age axes.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with, how old are these and where did they come from?
With the axes, it's quite tricky. It's much more trickier rather than the swords, for example. Though we still do have those classified by the typology as well, but the typological thing on each axe are fewer rather than the swords, for example. So it's a little bit more difficult, but maybe in a sense then a little bit more interesting, because it's it's a good test basically. What I would say here, at least for this one and this one, are quite old. I would say these two were quite characteristic for the maybe 10th to up to 12th, 13th century. The good dating quite hard actually to pinpoint a certain year or something, but I would say that with quite a certainty that from maybe 10th to 13th century with these two. I'm a little bit lost with this one. I just have to admit that, because it has that kind of shape. Maybe it was more used for cutting wood, for example, and those kind of axes maybe don't change that much in time. But still, and then again, I can say when these were found, it's actually maybe. It's more than nearly 100 years since this were found in the soil, and of course all the information of the finding, of the context and stuff like that are lost, or have been rewritten and lost in translation. That's of course really vital for us as an archaeologist, is to get every data from the soil as possible, dating the cultural layer and stuff, and so we don't know that much about the context of the finding context for these two artifacts, but we do know they were found in 1927.
Okay.
In farmsteads in Iceland. This from Munkaþverá in the northern part, and this in Kambur in Flói, and it's near Selfoss in the southern region. Now just speak like you know where Selfoss is. Come on, you don't know where Selfoss is?
Oh, of course. Clearly, I was there yesterday.
Yeah, of course. Then you know where Selfoss is. It's found near Selfoss.
Okay.
Okay. What can I say more about it? But, with axes, it's much more versatile tool and weapon than, for example, as with the swords.
Right. So they're like, you've got a wood axe, and you got a people axe.
Yeah.
And they really are designed differently.
Yeah.
So it looks like these two look to me definitely like wood axes.
Yeah.
Like there's a sharp angle to them. This goes in and it's going to split wood open.
Yeah.
This looks to me more like a fighting axe. It's thinner, but it sounds like this is really kind of a borderline case.
Yeah.
Do we know what the intent of this top guy would have been?
I think actually that you could be onto something. That maybe this is a little bit more with maiming people, and this one more about cleaving wood, and it definitely has that kind of a shape to it, as you said, correct. But then again, if I told you that you could actually do a serious damage with this kind of axe as well, so we can't be 100% sure. As I said, with the axe, it's quite versatile. You could use them for chopping wood, or you could, decide to use them to end your neighbors, suffering or life or whatever you like.
Very convenient.
Yeah. And but then again, interesting.
This would have also been an ideal and commonly used tool for butchering, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If you're going to slaughter a farm animal,
definitely.
a sheep or a pig, or probably a sheep or maybe a cow.
Yeah.
Kill it, and also you're going to do a lot of your actual butchering with an axe.
Yeah. And just think about how much axe is a better tool rather than the sword, for example. And of course, I'm not talking down the swords in any way. I'm just pointing out that you can use the axe for much more thing. As you say, you can use it in butcher of animals, and meat production, and for the wood and stuff like that. So
this also would have been a far less expensive thing to make.
Yeah.
It's less material and it's far simpler to craft.
Yeah. And I think actually with some of the axes, it would surprise me if none of them would have actually been made just here in Iceland. Because if you have the skill, you have the technology, you have the iron, you have everything. So basically you could produce this here. Rather than many of the swords, you would expect them to be, or different parts of the swords to be imported from different well-known manufacturers around Europe. That if you wanted a good sword, you just buy the best blade from the best blade manufacturer. But with the axes, so common, maybe a little bit easier to make. Why not just use your technology and the material here to do that?
Okay. How prevalent are axe heads in archaeological finds here in Iceland?
Recent years, not that many actually. There are, come to think of it, it's not that many. It was some in the northern part in Disnes, in a pagan graveyard there, and one in the eastern fjord in Stöð, where they are excavating a Viking-age hall or outpost even. Maybe think about that for your podcast, for your show a little bit later. But and then we have found or been handed into the National Museum some stray finds, some axes, but the dating of those are obscure. So we don't. So basically, even though they are quite common, as a weapon or as a tool, we have not found that many. The last maybe 5 to 10 years.
Okay, and I assume it's those more recent archaeological finds where you really have control over understanding the context and everything associated with them. Yeah. Instead of older digs where someone's pawing, it's a bone and it's some rock with a hole in it, and then an axe. And
definitely, the methods, of course, have changed dramatically, and the technology involved, of course, and the how we rescue different objects from the ground has changed. So
cool. Well, thank you. That was good. All right. So Reynir, you've done some serious research on how these were actually used as weapons. I assume you've done more research on that than on chopping down trees. That's slightly less interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that top axe? Do you think that's a wood axe or a fighting axe?
It's really difficult to say. I would need to see if we had something to take this off. I could see it better than it, but I can't be sure in any way. We know that these two are most likely wood axes for cutting trees, because you can see the angle of it. It's not thin to slaughter with or cut meat with. This is supposed to be retracted.
Right. So is there could you say that, this is a bearded axe, it comes down well below the shaft. Is that distinctive to fighting, or was that also a design that was used as a tool axe?
Axes are troublesome. So we have typology for swords. We could say this is this sword or this is this sword. Axes have also typology, and they're different, but they are really troublesome because we don't know. For example, with one of the most famous sagas in the axes in the sagas is called the Rimmigjur. We don't know if it's a one-handed axe or two-handed axe because they use it sort of differently, and we don't know if these heads belong on a one-handed axe or a two-handed axe. So we cannot know so many things about it. When we have the head in itself, this could fit on a really long shaft or a really short shaft. So if this was the fighting axe or not, or if this shape is a fighting axe shape or not, we have one shape that is the typical fighting axes, but we have also this shape that we have seen in fighting axes. So to answer most of your questions, I have no idea if that's helpful.
Well, it is 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
So what did you do in researching how Viking combat was done with axes? What did you find out?
So my introduction to the group Hurstwic, I came there in when they had already begun. They had been 10 years in when I came in there, and I gave them the tool of being hit in the nose. So to misquote the boxer Mike Tyson, everybody has a theory on how fighting will be until they get hit in the nose. So that's what I brought to the table, like actual dynamic combative simulations. So we just put on a helmet and hit each other. And there we find out so many things. And then we add that to the sources as well. Again, the axe is the iconic weapon of the Vikings. And I don't remember exactly who wrote it now, but it was a source on the Varangians, where they called the Vikings the axe-bearing warriors. And in our research, testing out the difference between weapons, for example, we see that a two-handed axe, often called the Dane axe, and I don't know why it's called the Dane axe, the two-handed axe delivers double the amount of destructive power as a sword does. So if the sword is a ballistic missile, the axe is a meteor. So you can understand why it would create fear in people when a man ran in with a two-handed axe. So it is just like a laser. It cuts away everything that's in front of you. It's not a technical tool, highly technical. It's just destructive, really destructive.
And less easy to redirect quickly once you start to take a swing, I presume.
Yep, just takes away what's in front of you, but takes a little bit of time to load again.
Do you have any insight into how often a two-handed axe was used as a solitary weapon versus a one-handed axe with a shield?
No, we don't. And there's even problems to that. Pictorial sources and literary sources show that sometimes people used a shield and a two-handed axe. And we're not 100% sure how they used that. Because awkwardly at least. Or they had a method that we haven't figured out yet. So to answer your question again, I don't know.
Okay.
If that's helpful.
How would you compare axes to spears in historical use?
They are just two very different tools. So another thing with the axe is to figure out how to use it. We analyzed all the sources, and the etymology of axe doesn't tell us anything because it's so old. But the kennings are literally a sort of poetic tool to understand an item. So if I said to you, I am sitting in the blood of Ymir. If you knew the mythology behind how the sea was created, that Ymir was the original being that was killed and the sea is created from him, you would understand, he's on a boat.
Okay.
So what is the kenning for axes is gálkhlífa, for example, or brynflagða, and that means sort of monster of armor. It's something that takes away apart what is in front of it. It is the monster against the armor. And we also don't see any axes thrown unless it's a move of desperation.
Okay.
So these were not throwing axes. These were just taking apart what was in front of your axis. Now spears, on the other hand, they were like 50-50. They could be thrown or they could be thrusted with. Really rarely they were used to cut with, like with hewing spears or something. So they were just different tools for different purposes. And you can even see it in the spear has a really strong connection to the supernatural and to death itself. Like Gungnir is the spear of Odin. Odin is the god of death. The Valkyrias are, they have spear name like Geirhöð. Odin sacrificed himself for himself on a spear, and so on and so on and so forth. It's always this death connection to the spear, and a little bit higher up. But this is just the tool that gets it done.
This is the go-to, the standard, most common.
Take away what's in front of you.
Okay. The armor-piercing ammunition of the Viking Age.
The cannon of the Viking Age.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this bit of insight into a couple of fantastic original Viking Age and slightly later. These are a little bit later than the swords that we took a look at. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. A big thanks to the National Museum of Iceland and both my guests for taking the time to come on and help us take a look at these. Thanks for watching.